So how many of you were in my earlier talk? Okay, significant portion of the room. Fairly easy win. There's only the one track today. So that talk I gave earlier really came out of this talk. In fact, as I was giving this talk for the very first time, I'm like, wow, like half of this stuff is talking about team happiness. So you're going to hear some overlap on some of the things that I talk about. But hopefully you hear lots of nice new perspectives too. It's something I want to encourage you to do. When you have questions, ask right then, okay? Because otherwise we go on, you forget it. And chances are if you had a question about something, somebody else here did too. And don't forget these are being recorded, so somebody watching this on YouTube, they may have that same question. So hopefully your question can help them answer their own questions. And also please wait for me to bring you the microphone so that the people on the recording can hear you. So who here likes to get their work done faster? All right, good show of hands. I like that. That's good. You're in the right talk then. The talk on extensive and excruciating planning will be later in the afternoon. And you know, as my subtitle for this slide shows, the key to this really is work small. Of course, that's two words that's trying to encompass a huge volume of thought and practice. This is a swell time to have a technical problem. There we go. Okay, now I'm an Agile Consultant, just as fair warning. We help companies do Agile transformations. The core reason why I do this, why I love my job, is that I want to help my customers solve their problems. Now the reason I'm an Agile Consultant is I'm actually not very fussy about how I solve that problem. I don't approach something with a cookie cutter approach of, you know, follow these steps, you'll get done fast. Anybody who's looking for that out of this presentation, I'm sorry to disappoint you, and you may want to go ask for your money back. I'm not fussy about how I solve the problem, as long as my customer is happy with what they've come up with. So, as I warned earlier, I am an Agile Consultant. I've been drinking the Kool-Aid. You know, I get paid to help people make their companies more agile. So there's a bias there. And keep that in mind when you're hearing what I talk about today. So one of the things that I want you to take away from this, there is no one true way to get your work done faster. There is a way that worked for me when I worked with this client. That way is not going to work for you. You're going to have to find your own way. Hopefully I can give you some, hopefully today though you're going to get some guideposts for how to find that way. The very first thing, one of the most important things to keep in mind, whatever your problem is, it's really a people problem. It's not your tech stack, although I've used tech stacks, I'm using a tech stack that makes me think it could factor high on my problem list. The root of the problem is really, it's always about the people that you're working with, that you're trying to solve your problem with. And when you are trying to solve your problem, keep in mind that everything you're going to do needs to be focused on the people that you're working with. And I'm not saying hire the right people, but find practices that work with the people that you have and the people that you can hire. So we always want to get the right people. It's not always the smartest people. Who here has taken an IQ test as part of a job interview? I'm going to put my hand up, I've done it. This used to be a standard practice. IBM pioneered it. In fact, the IBM IQ test is kind of iconic. But here's the trick. IQ isn't a real thing. There is no good objective measure of intelligence. Your intelligence is only relevant in the context in which it's being measured. you might come across as incredibly stupid. If I ask my cat to do quantum physics, my cat doesn't come out real bright. Now, my professors will tell you I didn't either. But I still do better than the cat. If it comes to catching a bird, I don't come out real bright. My cat, however, is spitting feathers. His IQ test always passes. The thing you really want to look for is not the best, the brightest, because that doesn't exist. What does exist is people who are adaptable. Somebody who can get dropped into a situation that's maybe unfamiliar, or the situation changes out from under them. Those are really good people to work with, especially if you're trying to be an agile organization. Now, that's not to say that people who aren't adaptable don't have a place in your company. We'll talk about that more a little bit later, but you can be very successful working with people who aren't very adaptable, as long as when you're figuring out who works on what, you are adaptable. And say, well, okay, this person's not adaptable, but here's this process that needs to be done, and it needs to be done a lot, and they're good at it. If I give them this, they will excel at it. So sometimes you have to be the one to be adaptable, because some of the people you are working with can't be. As long as we're talking about people, something really important, take care of them. So your success as a team is going to depend on the success of all of the people on that team. Just like with a plant, they need proper care and feeding. One of the biggest things that I always preach, and I've never found there to be an exception to this, is keep a sustainable pace. And how many people here are familiar with the Agile Manifesto? Okay, maybe a third of the people here. All right, as an Agile Consultant, obviously, we post this up on walls everywhere, so I see it all the time. That speaker wants to pick up interference. Sustainable pace is one of the core principles of the Agile Manifesto. That's not to say sometimes we don't have to give some extra effort, but we don't try to sustain that effort. We don't try to sustain that 60-hour work week. Hey, I don't go home to my family until 10 o'clock at night. Or I go home to my family, I eat dinner, and then I keep working till 10 o'clock at night. Played that game. Once decided to call it a night because there was a bug that was dancing a Roomba across my laptop screen, and I was pretty sure at that point that I wasn't going to make the best decisions that I could make. So, where I work at Pillar Technology, but just as a personal thing, I really do preach this: no nights, no weekends, and no exceptions. Whenever I go work with a client who's been doing that, and I once worked with a client who was doing nights and weekends for a year straight. They were trying to save $1 million. They did the nights, they did the weekends. They farmed stuff out to outside consultants. Anything to get it done by the deadline to save $1 million. They had a verifiable record. They had verifiable records of $600,000 in sales lost within the first 6 weeks of turning the system on, the new system on. That doesn't cover all the hidden costs. It doesn't cover, you might have, if you saw my earlier talk, talked about medical expenses associated with burnout. And there were medical expenses associated with those long hours. It doesn't take into account all of those expenses too. It doesn't take into account the lost sales that they don't see because they didn't get far enough into the process to register in the system. So they didn't save any money. It cost them a lot of money. And they had to pay me to come in and help fix it. And I don't work cheap. And I don't work alone. I work mostly with people that bill higher than I do. So that, they had to spend an awful lot of money to get this fixed. The good news, that client's in really great shape now. We don't work with them anymore, but I see people that I worked with there say, yeah, the those ideas that we started with down in our little team, we're really pushing them out through the company. The point being not so much a sales pitch for me, but by doing these things that I'm going to talk about, it can really catch on and spread. So another thing that's really important to getting stuff done is trust. The teams I've worked on best, that I've enjoyed the most, there's this really high level of trust between the business and the developers, between members of the development team and each other, between members of the business team and each other. Everybody talks about it overseas, when you're working with people in, say, 2 continents, it's really hard. Well, my best experience ever was with a team that worked in the UK. We worked in Michigan. They worked east of London. That was the single best business relationship I think I've ever had between the developers and the business, because we had this incredibly high degree of trust. If you trust each other, you can get over all kinds of obstacles, even a 5-hour time zone difference. I will confess that I did wake up at 4 in the morning so that we could do planning meetings in their mornings some days. I can't recommend that, but it worked for us. So building trust isn't trivial. It doesn't come for free. And I was very fortunate in that situation that somebody that I worked with, he's no longer with my company, he was very good at building those kind of relationships, and he had set that up. And I got that luxury of walking into this beautiful thing he set up. But I did get to watch how that was set up, how that was sustained. So it's really 3 simple little points. Be open about your failings and weaknesses. If you're not good about something, and that's going to be an issue, bring it up. Say, hey, this is a new technology. I don't really know it that well. We're going to have to explore a little bit while we're doing it. And the value of that is not to make yourself look weak or even to set low expectations. It's to let people know, hey, we're not going to move at the pace that we're accustomed to moving. So we need to build that in to our schedules. We need to set that expectation for ourselves. We're not going to be able to deliver quite as fast. And so people know what's coming. You also want to encourage feedback, because even if you're open about your failings and your weaknesses, you've got failings and weaknesses you don't know about. Maybe you haven't had a chance to discover them. Maybe you've got a blind spot. We've all got giant blind spots to what we can and can't do. So encourage feedback. And when you get that feedback, accept it as a gift. And that's a hard, accept feedback as a gift is sort of a cliche, and it's hard to understand what that means just from that. But what it really means is when somebody's giving you that feedback, listen to them for the purpose of understanding what they're saying. There's almost no need to respond. In fact, it's probably better if you don't respond. Thank them for the feedback. There might be things you didn't understand about the feedback. So it's worth asking very open and honest questions about, you said that didn't go well there. Could you clarify what parts of that had trouble? And then it's really important, act on that feedback. Maybe the problem is I've got a mouth like a sailor and I'm working next to a born-again Christian. It is causing a little friction. Real situation. Really happened. Like most programmers, profanity is the language I know best. I put a swear box on my desk. Started carrying coin. Like many married men, I do not carry cash because I'm not allowed to keep it for long enough. So I actually had to start the habit of carrying coin. In my marriage, actually, my wife was almost always the one carrying cash, but that's because early on I realized if I had cash, I'm just going to hand it over to her anyway. So I start really early. Oh, I've got cash. Let's give it to her. But act on that feedback. You know, if somebody tells you, hey, you're being a jerk, they're probably going to use stronger words, but I was told that this is a family-friendly crowd, so we aren't going to use the words that they're probably going to use. Ask for specific incidences. Now also, try not to be the jerk who gets defensive. When somebody tells you about your failings, don't get defensive. Don't defend the position. 2 reasons. 1, it's just rude. They're trying to help you. 2, it makes you look weak. If you were defending, that means you were in the subordinate position. Don't do that. The last item there is extend the trust that you want to receive to other people without expecting anything back from them. Some of them are going to disappoint you. And I do talk about accountability at some points in here, and that's where holding people accountable comes in. But while some of them are probably going to disappoint you, many of them are not. They're going to instead reward your trust by doing that thing that you asked. And when that happens, that strengthens that relationship. That makes it so your team can work together faster, so that you have to spend less time negotiating things and more time to say, hey, can you do this? And it's going to get done. Again, those feedback loops that I talked in there about feedback, that's going to come into play there. It's probably the first time I ask for something from somebody. If they don't ask me a lot of questions about what it is that I really want, they're not going to deliver what I was looking for. And then I have to give that open and honest feedback about, hey, I was really kind of looking for this other thing, and that'll help establish that relationship of trust. Now, speaking of the feedback, this slide comes from a book called Getting Naked by Patrick Lencioni. When you look this up on Amazon, and if you haven't read the book, I really encourage you to read it. Do not just put in the title. That will also not be a family-friendly search result. I speak from experience. Put in Patrick Lencioni. He's also the author of The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, which is a really common business book that people read. In fact, if you're having problems with the trust issue, that's a good book to pick up, because that's something they talk about. But one of his mantras is speak the kind truth. So I didn't get what I wanted out of somebody. Say, I wanted an advertising campaign for our new product or our new releases coming out. And the campaign they come up with is very much not what I want for the product I'm working on. I could either just suck it up and deal with it, which leads to resentment. Both I'm resenting them for not giving me what I want, and they can tell that I resent them. And it's going to make bad feelings there. Instead, when you see the problem, address it, and address it right then. It's just like working with a dog. When the dog does something you don't want, you got to correct it right then, or the dog doesn't know what you're mad about. People are not that different than dogs. Confront the problem right away. People will ultimately be happy that you talked to them right away, so they didn't continue doing something that wasn't what was wanted. But when you're confronting them, have empathy for them, because what they did in good faith. They figured, well, this is what they're going to want. They're going to be very happy with what I'm doing for them. And so assume that they acted in good faith, and that from their perspective, they're acting like a rational person, even if what they do for you is crazy from your perspective. And understand that there's real people, real feelings that get hurt. That's really important to remember. But if you do those, people will thank you for speaking the truth to them. Now, I'm sure you've all seen the meme on the internet too. Everybody wants the truth until you tell it to them, and then you're a jerk. Again, we're family friendly. If you follow these practices, you don't have to be the jerk. Now, another thing to keep in mind, so it's a person who let you down. It's a person, like I said, it's always a people problem. But understand that the person really isn't the problem. There's something about the situation that they're in that is really what caused the root of the problem. So what you really want to do when there is a problem is look for the flaw in the system. Maybe the flaw, let's talk about that ad campaign that somebody did for me, and I'm like, I don't want to be associated with that ad campaign. Maybe the flaw is, hey, we don't have a good feedback mechanism for taking their ad ideas, their ideas for marketing, and talking with the rest of the team about what do you really want out of this. It's really easy to just toss something over the wall to the marketing department and say, hey, can you promote this new release of this product? And then I don't have to think about it again. That's awesome. I don't have to think. I like not thinking. The problem is, of course, I didn't make the time to talk with them. So they just go off and do, well, this looks good. This looks great. They're really going to like it. See, my point being, address the problems that are in the system. And as I talked about, remember, from their perspective, from whatever situation they're in, they're a rational actor. So, Mike, who checks in breaking code changes and then leaves the country for 6 weeks, this really happened. That place that we're working nights and weekends, gentleman checked in some breaking changes, broke everything, and then got on a plane for China. And he was going to visit family, and they live in a remote. It's not like we could call him up, even if we were willing to bear the international charges. He wasn't where there was a phone. He was not in a major city. He was going to see family that lived out in the country, sort of, relax for a little bit. But from what he did, from his perspective, what he did was completely rational. Other teams had been asking him, hey, can you do this thing? And so he did that thing. What he hadn't taken into account was that had spillover effects on the rest of us and broke our stuff. So from his perspective, he's a hero. I just enabled this whole team to do a great thing. And now I'm going to go take my well-earned vacation. Needless to say, that team was very happy, and the other teams were not. The fix was a fix to the system. Mike's very valuable employee, knows a lot of stuff. He was able to make those big changes really quickly. That helped a lot of people. The change in that case was to actually give him a new role that was more suited to his particular skill set, which was looking at how systems integrate. So another thing to keep in mind, I want to get done fast. There's a lot of analogies we like to tell people. And my favorite one to go to is always, analogies are powerful. They give us a model for thinking about a problem. The one they love to give us in school is building a house. Okay, you're going to make a plan. It's going to be great. It's going to be detailed. You're going to know exactly where each outlet goes, where each plumbing line goes. And you're going to execute that plan. They make us feel comfortable and safe. I mean, you can't even actually build a house without submitting plans for approval. If you get caught building a house and there are not plans filed with your township, you will be stopping building your house. You will be filing those plans. So these plans make everybody feel comfortable. So we bring that into the software world or the business world. We make these detailed plans. And who here has been in the military? So battle plans, how well did those work? How often did you actually execute one to completion? 5 minutes is a pretty good record. 5 minutes is a really good record. You know, when we make a plan, there's a reality. There's things about reality we don't know. But yes, you paraphrased it perfectly there. No plan survives contact with the enemy. There's always reality that you don't know. For one thing, reality changes from underneath you. New regulatory things come in, not in the military realm so much, but you know, in the business realm, new regulations get passed. A new competitor appears. An existing competitor comes out with a really cool new product, and you better respond, or your market share is going to disappear. You know, or in the case of building a house, hey, they find a giant rock that can't be moved where they were going to put a foundation footing. Maybe where they were going to put the nice bar in your basement that you were really looking forward to. Instead, there's this big rock that can't be shifted. Real houses don't even follow the house building analogy that they teach us. What we want instead, I mean, you got to have some plan. You got to know what you're going to build. But instead of planning it in great detail, break your work down into short feedback loops. So how many are in an Agile shop? Okay, a few of you. So you have weekly or bi-weekly demos? You demo every day? Okay. Okay, you have a demo every 4 weeks. Okay. So the point of the demo for those who don't work in an Agile shop is, as a developer, I want to show the work that I did to the business. The reason I do that is I want to know, did I build the thing that they asked for? And maybe even more importantly, yeah, sure, I built the thing they asked for. Is that really the thing they wanted? Because it happens a lot. People think that there's a thing that they want, and then they get it, and they realize, oh, well, that doesn't actually meet the need that I have. And it could be that the need changed. It could be that they couldn't fully understand the need until they saw an implementation of what they asked for. Yes? I'm going to do that not one-handed.
I used to work in a Waterfall Shop, and they charted it out, and if the customer wanted something done like a new button, it was 18 months. 6 months to get out of the company before they gave it to us, and then 12 months after that. So it was a year and a half before they saw a change. And if it was wrong, that's a year and a half lost.
All right. That's an excellent point. A year and a half lost. If your competitor is bringing a new product to market, you know about your new competitor's products hitting the market pretty much when they arrive at the market, not much before. Unless your industrial espionage game is way better than most. A year and a half of letting your competitor have that market that could have been yours. That's make or break for most tech companies. You know, even in a world that's a little slower to respond, like automotive, a year and a half, man, you're looking for some trouble. So, in addition to that lost sales opportunity there, these short feedback loops are also good for not building on mistakes. So I build the wrong thing. Yeah, and I keep going for a month, 2 months. Nobody sees it. And then suddenly somebody looks at it and says, hey, that's not what we need. I've built everything on top of that mistake. So now I've got to rip all of that out. That's an expensive change. That's going to be some long, hard conversations about, do I really need to change? Now, of course, you kind of want to build the right thing, so that not changing has some hidden costs itself. I'm not building the thing that I really need, that my customer really needs. So I really need to respond quickly. I need those responses to be cheap. The short feedback loops make it cheaper to change. So we have a demo. Now there's some tricks about your demo. A lot of people are really nervous about not showing a polished product. You're probably further ahead though, and I always tell my customers this, show the incomplete work. Yeah, this screen isn't much more than, you know, my experienced architects scribbles on a piece of paper that, like, they may have literally done when they were taking the bus into work that morning. But still, show that, because it gives people something that they can react to. So, you know, if like the screen drawing that you give somebody, if they look at it and say, well, that doesn't capture what I need off of this. This doesn't have all the information on it that we need to complete the task that the screen is trying to solve, then you're going to get that feedback quickly. And hey, guess what? It's only a sketch on paper at that point. Nobody's built anything. We haven't lost developer time on that. We're fixing it while it's still cheap. Or it's gone further and the developers made the screen. And maybe the full functionality doesn't work behind it, but it's got some of it. If the stakeholders here, the business, the customer, whoever it is, the people who's buying you need, if they can look at that early and say, well, that's not, you know, I know that's what I asked for, but what I really need is actually this different thing. You're able to change direction while it's still cheap, while you're in the early games. Finally, keep in mind when you're giving this feedback, you're not your code. So somebody's rejected my this screen that I put the last 40 hours of my work life into this screen. I'm pretty happy with what I did. I think it's great, or I wouldn't even be showing it off. When somebody says that's not what I asked for, or that's not what I need, don't take that personally. It's feedback that might be hard to receive, but it's feedback that you're going to use to give them what they do need. Be willing to throw out that work you did to give somebody the thing that helps them. This happened to me recently, by the way. We had not been doing good feedback loops. We had spent several months building plumbing layers. There was nothing we could show. The plumbing layers turned out to be wrong. They made it harder to do the work, and after months of struggling with that, harder to do the work, I talked about don't do nights and weekends. I took a couple of nights and a weekend, and I stripped it out and put in the thing that we needed. Stripped out all that plumbing. Because it was too painful. So this is a recent addition to this slide deck, and it comes from pain on a similar project about we hadn't had anything to show. We worked on plumbing layers. I mean, really cool. It's straight code. I can write tests for it. I don't have it's an easy testing situation. I don't have those pesky users giving me feedback. We tried to push it out to production to show it off, and it was a bad time. It was bad enough my HR director saw me walking around the office, and she pulled me aside and says, "You look like you're having a really bad time. Can we talk about this?" Just to give you some context, my HR director works remote. That's how bad it was. She could see how bad a time I was having. Things I've seen on successful teams. In your very first week as a team, deploy to production. I mean, you don't really even know what you're going to build yet. It doesn't matter. Get something simple. Stand up a core empty app in whatever tech stack you're going to be using in production. Just keep doing that. Keep pushing it all the way out to production as often as you possibly can in your environment. What you're going to find a lot of barriers to doing that. If you're in a large enterprise, there's probably a long list of approvals that an application has to go to before it can reach production. You're going to have to spend a lot of time removing those barriers. Every barrier you run into, try to knock it down or figure out a way to get over it quickly. A lot of times that's going to come down to trust. You know, I mentioned before the importance of trust. Well, you've got other teams you're going to have to develop trust with too. you might need to develop some trust with the database administrators, so that instead of a long, lengthy review process to get something approved, they understand, yeah, this guy does know what he's doing with the database. He's not going to do something idiotic. And so instead of having to go through, a multi-week review process for every single database change, you can have it be so that he looks at it and says, yeah, that's good. Go ahead and we'll slot that into the next database update. So you can move faster to build that trust. Sometimes it's getting permissions to do stuff. Do you have even rights to release something to production? Who does have the rights to release something to production? The barrier might be just finding that person. And finally, accept the fact you're going to build the wrong thing. All right, I'm going really slow. I'm only about 60% of the way through this. But accept that you're going to build the wrong thing. Nobody builds the right thing the first time. Everybody likes to talk about the success of Tesla and how this wonderful product they make. Elon Musk's first electric car was a giant stinker on the market. He used that to learn a lot of lessons. He came back with a better car. You're going to do the same thing, and hopefully it's not as expensive as standing up a whole car company. You want to make changing directions cheap. You really want to invest the bare minimum in planning. Plan enough so that you know what you're going to build, so that you can see some of the obstacles you're going to hit. But don't make this detailed plan of every feature we're possibly going to need, because you're not going to execute that plan. I guarantee you the one thing you know about a plan is this is what I'm not going to do. I'm not going to do exactly what I planned. Keep your backlog small. Now, if you're a product owner or a team lead, one of the ways that you often feel like I'm doing my job, there's a long backlog of features and stories that we have to play that's going to get us where we want to be. But remember, we aren't going to do what we planned. We hope to, but we know we're not actually going to execute that exact plan. We're going to have to change. So if you've got this big backlog of stuff that you're going to do, you're not actually going to do it. And so it's just noise. It's time you've wasted. Craftsmanship, the quality of your work, is really important. And I say this not to be the pretty code princess, which I have used on my LinkedIn profile before as my title. But because if you pay attention to the quality with which you're building your software, it's going to make it easier to change direction. If things are more modular, if they're more compartmentalized, well, it's easier to rip out the part that needs to change without breaking all of the other parts, without having to touch every file in the system. Unless what you decided was, oh, we chose a bad tech stack and we need a new language, which happens sometimes. And while I'm saying craftsmanship is important, also don't prematurely optimize. Don't, for instance, optimize for performance until you know if you have a performance problem in production. If production's fast enough, sure, I could write more efficient code. But is that a good use of my time? Or should I be looking for a problem to solve for the business, for a user? That might be a better use of my time. That might make my annual profit sharing bonus a lot nicer. Let me go back, get you a microphone. Let's see, you know the drill.
On that subject of prematurely optimizing, we have had for some years now at work a huge push for the developers to optimize their stored procedures and everything to really get the highest performance because of our critical business systems. And in virtually every case that we've scanned through the procedures to find the pain points.
Could you take 2 steps that way?
It was because
He's good.
Okay. It was because the databases were lacking necessary indexes.
Yep. That actually brings up a really, two microphones. That brings up a really great point. Don't try to optimize, try to fix stuff without having some good metrics about what's really wrong. Because a lot of times what you think is the problem isn't the problem. Where we talked about the system, blame the system and not the person before. It's the same situation. I feel in my gut, this is the problem. This is where I see it. But I need to actually analyze the system, get some real metrics and see, is that the problem? All right, there we go. Okay, so we are running a little short on time because I'm not going to get between people and lunch. I know how to get trampled. So yeah, let's move on to some of these other things. Automation. If you want to get done faster, automate the stupid stuff. The things that take a lot of time, don't add a lot of value. If there's a way to automate it, do it. My team just we're writing essentially a live ETL tool where we're converting from an AS400 database written with DB2 to something that lives in the Azure cloud. But we aren't getting rid of the DB2 either. The tool will stay in sync. And so there's a lot of time spent translating DB2 table names. Anybody who's used DB2 knows that there's some unwritten law somewhere that table names and field names cannot be readable by humans. We're translating that to the SQL Server world, where there is strong encouragement to make sure that somebody seeing your schema can understand what you're representing. We used to spend a lot of time looking in this mainframe data dictionary, which was literally a text file that you accessed on the AS400. We used to spend a lot of time in there with a subject matter expert. And recently we built an automated tool that could look at that file for us and just describe, this is what that data entity represents. This is what makes one of these entities unique. This is its linkage to other entities in the system. We went from, it takes most of a day to write one story card, to we wrote, I believe we wrote 10 story cards in the space of one workday. That saved us a lot of time. That saved us having to tie up the time of a subject matter expert who has other demands on her time. Definitely automate your deployment. Your CI, we talk about CI/CD systems. If you are manually deploying anything, please automate that. If you don't know how to do that, come talk to myself, come talk to Jim, who was presenting just before. We do those things. And I know lots of places that don't have automated deployment, but their deployment is very manual. Definitely automate that, because that's a miserable time-sucking chore. There's good automation tools. Maybe in an ideal world, you can automate backlog grooming. As a tech lead, I spend a lot of time with my backlog grooming. If I could find a way to automate that, I'd put myself out of a job and I could go get a more fun job.
I'd say you'd have to add one more thing to that slide: automate ruthlessly, but not obsessively. Right? Don't try to always make it to that last mile. Sometimes 95% is good enough. Right?
Yes. That is an absolutely excellent caveat. Remember earlier we talked about optimization and don't do it prematurely. Automation is a form of optimization. Don't automate more than going to give you value. So I'm really good at hitting random buttons on this. All right. It also occurs to me I'm looking at the mouse pad upside the arrow pad upside down, so when I think I'm going backwards, I'm going forwards. Industry best practices. Cancel your subscription to CIO magazine. For those not familiar with CIO magazine, they're probably, along with the O'Reilly organization, the biggest propagator of buzzwords in our industry. And all our applications suddenly have to get buzzword compliant. So now we're all writing microservices, except most of us aren't really writing microservices. We're writing monoliths, just like we always were, just have to be split across multiple processes. Just because something worked well for one company does not mean it's going to work well at your company. What I said early on in this, there is no one true way. What works perfectly for me is not going to work for you. That's because we're all special snowflakes. We absolutely have to keep that in mind. That what I do is not what you do. What you do is not what the next person does. So, I like snowflakes, they're pretty. Something to really keep in mind, consultants, like me, we love to sell systems. If I could just pre-package an agile transformation, come drop it off at your desk, I've got a script that I use, I'll tell you what, I'd be taking a lot more vacations on Maui. If I come into your company, you're paying me a lot of money to be there. So there's this tendency to think, well, I'm paying him a lot of money. He must be really smart. Well, about as smart as the average person. Just because you're paying me a lot of money doesn't mean that the system I'm trying to sell you is right. And just to be clear, I won't try to sell you a system. I will help you build a system. But these are like plans. You see this, oh, I could just follow these steps and I would be agile. No, you won't. You have to remember that it's different. So, as important as this subject is to me, I've already spoken for an hour on the subject of team health. I don't really want to belabor the point. I've been able to smell lunch for the last 20 minutes. Does anybody have questions? All right. We'll flip through these briefly. So, if it's about lunch, I don't know the menu. I'm sorry.
So the short the short feedback loops that you were talking about earlier, is there anything that you can do in the requirements gathering phase to bring what they ask for and what they need closer together?
Absolutely. So the very first thing is to build a feedback loop into your requirements gathering phase. I talked about that team I worked with that was overseas, and it was a really happy pairing relationship. We had a feedback loop built into our requirements gathering phase, where every time a user story was written, we would review it with the team, the business and the developers. Say, does this have enough information that we really know what we're trying to do? I found that to be actually pretty rare for companies to do that. But in that case, it often highlighted, hey, we don't know a thing here. We don't know a business goal here. We don't know a regulatory situation that we need to know more about. And then, the business, which was based in the UK, could go back and ask the people they needed to talk to there, hey, there's another requirement. We think there's another requirement hiding out here we don't know about. Here's the questions that I got back from that. It's not perfect, but it definitely does. We found that we had less stalling out on, hey, I can't complete this card because I don't know this thing. I can't complete this user story. Did I answer your question? Yeah. Okay. And if you come up with a better answer, my contact information is at the end of this presentation. Please send it to me.
situation I have is where we have the product owner, we get what the requirements are, we code, test, give it to him to look at, and he sends us back a note, yeah, this all works, and then a whole new list of extra stuff he wants done in this sprint. And then we talk to our manager, okay, we can do this, but we'll put this in the next sprint. And our manager looks, no, I want you to try to get this stuff done in this sprint. Even though the whole time we developed the code, showed it to him, none of this extra stuff showed up. But we got to hurry up and get it in a couple days.
So what I heard out of that was more of a sustainable pace issue, and that's something that you might need to talk about accountability for that. It's going to be a hard conversation to have. I understand. Oh, I want this thing. Shoot, I will often catch myself. Well, it would be cooler if it did this too. It will solve this problem that we're having here. But it seems like a place where you'd want to have one of those conversations about, okay, if I've only got so much time I can actually work. And so if I'm working on this, something else is not going to get done. So which is more important? Which is more important for you to have? I've been in a lot of situations where they will say, well, I want both. And you're just going to have to, we talked about speaking the kind truth. You're going to have to do that. But yeah, I understand that wanting both, but here's how long this is probably going to take me. When I'm working on that, I'm not working on this. So what's it going to be? You don't have to go, in fact, I wouldn't even just give a blanket statement if I'm sorry, I can't do that. But maybe more approach it of, what is more important to you? What will make you happier to have, give you joy? This new thing that you just asked for, or that other thing that you also asked for before. If you can get somebody to that point, you can really have a pretty happy outcome, because we're supposed to be agile and we're supposed to adapt. And maybe it really is the important thing to do to say, okay, this new thing that we can see, we kind of need that now, or it would help us a lot to have that now, and that other thing isn't as important to have right now. Did that address your... Okay. All right, other questions? All right. Well then, I'll not be the person standing between you and your lunch.